It was supposed to be the safe haven. While the world burned in 2008, Canada stood still. Stable banks, no subprime crisis, a resource superpower. 10 years ago, the New York Times called it the envy of the world. Today, it is a cautionary tale. The most expensive housing market on the planet, a massive brain drain to the US, and an economy that has effectively stopped producing anything of value except debt. Canada isn't just in a recession, it is structurally broken. And the scariest part? This isn't just Canada's problem, it's a preview of what happens when a G7 nation decides to trade innovation for real estate speculation. Let's decode the collapse of the Canadian dream. To understand this crash, we have to go back to 2008. When the global financial crisis hit, the US took its medicine. Banks failed. Homeowners were wiped out. It was painful, but the system reset. Canada, they skipped the medicine. Their banks were conservative. They didn't have the toxic assets. So, instead of deleveraging, they doubled down. When global interest rates hit zero, Canada didn't use that cheap money to build factories or tech hubs. They used it to bid up houses. It became a national addiction. Why start a business? Why invest in R&D? Just buy a condo in Toronto, wait 2 years, make $200,000 tax-free. It was the perfect get-rich-quick scheme, sanctioned by the government. Politicians knew it was a bubble. Economists screamed it was a bubble. But nobody stopped the music. Because when 65% of your voters own homes, fixing housing prices means destroying their net worth. So, they let it ride. The result? Today, a standard home in Vancouver costs over $1.5 million US. That is 15 times the median income. For context, a healthy market is usually 3 to 4 times. Vancouver is now more expensive than New York, London, and Singapore relative to income. This isn't a market, it's a caste system. If your parents have equity, you survive. If they don't, you are a serf in your own country. They call it the Bank of Mom and Dad. It's not a joke anymore. It's the only mortgage lender left. But high rent is just a symptom. The disease is deeper. The disease is productivity. Canada and the US are siblings. Same language, similar culture, integrated economies. But look at the worker output. Today, the average American worker is 30% more productive than their Canadian counterpart. Are Canadians lazy? No. They work almost the same hours. The difference is capital investment. In America, companies invest in software, AI, and automation. In Canada, capital doesn't go to companies. It goes to concrete boxes in the sky. Why would a VC invest in a risky startup when they can get guaranteed returns flipping houses? This has starved Canadian innovation. Where is the Canadian Google? The Canadian Tesla? Shopify is the outlier, not the rule. BlackBerry died 15 years ago. Since then, silence. The numbers are brutal. In the 1980s, manufacturing was the backbone. Today, Canada is an economy of selling houses to each other and digging oil out of the ground. And even the oil sector is under siege due to global climate policies. So, you have an economy that doesn't make things, doesn't invent things, and relies on selling overpriced shelter to new immigrants. Which brings us to the most controversial pillar of this collapse. To keep the GDP looking positive, the government pulled the only lever they had left: mass immigration. The logic was simple. More people equals more consumers equals higher GDP. Between 2021 and 2023, Canada added over 3 million people. That is practically adding the population of Chicago in 2 years. But here is the catch. They didn't build the infrastructure for them. Housing starts flat, hospitals, overwhelmed. It's simple supply and demand. You cannot increase the population by 3 million and build only 500,000 homes without causing a humanitarian crisis. We aren't talking about skilled talent anymore. We are talking about a guest worker underclass. International students paying $30,000 a year for diplomas from strip mall colleges, just to work at Tim Hortons hoping for a green card. It's exploitation disguised as education. And this creates a vicious cycle. Cheap labor suppresses wages. High demand spikes rents. The rich get richer. The poor get crushed. So, what happens when you are a smart, ambitious young Canadian? You do the math. In Toronto, you make $80,000 and pay $3,000 in rent. In Austin or Seattle, you make $150,000 and pay the same rent. You leave. This is the brain drain. The University of Waterloo is basically a feeder school for Silicon Valley. Canada subsidizes their education. The US reaps the tax revenue. Doctors, engineers, software devs, they are voting with their feet. Canada is importing low-wage labor to serve coffee, while exporting high-wage talent to build AI. That is a recipe for becoming a third-world economy wrapped in a first-world flag. And now, the final blow. Canada's economy is totally dependent on the United States. 75% of all exports go south. They are effectively the 51st state, economically speaking. But the political winds in Washington are shifting. With a protectionist US government, tariffs are back on the table. If the US puts a 10% tariff on Canadian auto parts or lumber, it's game over for Ontario manufacturing. When America sneezes, Canada catches pneumonia. But this time, America might just close the window and lock the door. Canada is at a crossroads. Option A: continue the decline. Productivity falls, the talent leaves, the currency devalues. It becomes a playground for the global rich and a struggle for everyone else. Option B: the painful reset. Pop the housing bubble, invest in real industries, cut the red tape. It will hurt. Homeowners will lose money, but it's the only way to save the future. This is a lesson for the world. You cannot build a prosperous nation on debt and real estate speculation. Prosperity comes from production, not inflation. Canada forgot that. Now they are paying the price.